All right, here we go. 1 Samuel. And it's the longest chapter, and it's interesting, but Goliath is the longest description in Scripture of a warrior. And there's a reason for that. So remember where we are. We are now contrasting Saul, who is a king for whom the Spirit has departed, right? With David, who is the anointed future king, who has the presence of the Spirit with him. And so these two contrasts are critical because remember how Saul became king. They wanted a king, remember chapter 8, who would do what? Fight their battles for them. Chapter 8:20, right? And so they thought the best way to fight your battles, the best way to negotiate the challenges of your life was to find a tall, good-looking, kind of dumb guy. And since you're so close to the elections, this is what people still do. And the taller and the better looking, probably the dumber. I mean, it's just the way it goes. This is nothing new, and so we saw that in history. So we're going to read a lot of this, and then I'll comment, and we've got fun little things to talk about. Now, the Philistines gathered their armies for battle in 17:1. And they were gathered at Soko, which belongs to Judah, and camped between Soko and Azekah in Ephes-Dammim, and Saul, I think that's about 13 miles west of Bethlehem, somewhere in there. Saul and the men of Israel were gathered and encamped in the valley of Elah and drew up in a line of battle against the Philistines. So remember, this is ancient warfare. If you've seen Viking movies, where they line up on either side, that's exactly how warfare was engaged at that period of time. So and by the way, they've done archaeological studies, and lo and behold, this is a great description of the valley. There's actually a big ravine there, and the armies stood on either side. And if you can picture that in your head, and then you're going to see Goliath come on one side and challenge someone to come and fight him. And the Philistines stood on the mountain on the one side, and Israel stood on the mountain on the other side with a valley between them. And that's the ravine that they've actually found in archaeological studies. And there came out from the camp of the Philistines a champion named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. You know how high that is? That's 9 feet 6 inches. So he's a little bigger than LeBron James. And you got to think about that for a minute. It's like, well, no one's that tall. So there was a guy in Illinois in 1940 named Robert Wadlow who was 8 feet 11 inches tall. There's a guy currently alive today in Turkey who is 8 feet 3 inches tall. But if you looked at your kind of village studies, if I can put it that way, Gath is where they sent all the Nephilim. And remember when they were thinking, the spies, Joshua was looking into the promised land, they came running back and said, what? There are giants in the land. And the giants in the land, Joshua relegated them to Gath. And so this is probably, Goliath is probably one of the ancestors of that group. By the way, people lived longer then and grew taller. But he was unusual. Yeah, don't forget, this is not usual. Israel's never seen this. So this is what you don't want to walk away from the story is say, oh, Goliath, oh yeah, there was a lot of those guys around. No, there weren't. That's why they had him. So he was unique then, he's unique now, he'd be unique now. He had a helmet of bronze on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. So remember what the mail coat is, you've seen that in these Viking things. So you know what that would weigh? That reference? 125 pounds. So, he's carrying this around, and he's got a bronze helmet on. So this guy is formidable, right? He's, 9.5 feet tall, and it's not like he's waltzing around, in his tutu. He's got all this armor on. And he had bronze armor on his legs, and a javelin of bronze slung between his shoulders, and the shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron. That's 15 pounds. So think of it this way. I don't know if you like to do archery or bow hunting or something, just think of, one of those things coming at you, and the head of it's 15 pounds. Going to do a little bit of damage, maybe, just a little, behind a guy who's got 9 feet 6 inches of leverage, right? So remember the power of someone like this. Do you guys know the formula for power? If you're a fighter, force equals mass times velocity, right? Force equals mass times velocity. So if you're teaching someone to hit heavier, they have to hit faster. Assuming their weight doesn't change, right? Unless they're going to put on 20 pounds in the next 3 minutes of that fight. If they want to hit heavier, you have to hit faster. Force equals mass, whatever your weight is, times the velocity. So think about this guy's mass now. And behind the velocity of whatever he's coming at you with, you're talking about someone of incredible power. Incredible power. And his shield bearer went before him. So probably his shield bearer went before him because it probably took a separate man to carry the shield. If you think about it, right? I mean, this is a massive operation. So if you can get this picture in your head of this guy coming, and in verse 8, he stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why have you come out to draw up for battle? Why are you bothering with this? What's the point? Am I not a Philistine, and are you not servants of Saul?" You understand that this is, this is a complete slam. This is complete sarcasm. Look, I'm a Philistine, and you're with this punk Saul? You cannot be serious. He has no respect for Saul whatsoever. None. Now remember, Saul's big, tall, good-looking guy, right? He's the best Israel had to offer. That's why they picked him. They took the big guy. Choose a man for yourselves and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us. So there's the game that's going to get played. Whoever wins this battle, the losers have to become the servants. So Israel would become the servants of the Philistines, or on the chance, and Goliath thinks there's no chance of this, the Israelites win, then the Philistines would become Israelite servants. Now, you understand what it means to be a servant this day and age, right? Yeah, you, the family, the wife, the kids, everybody does exactly what they say. And they might take an eye or two just to make sure that you stick around, a thumb, a few toes. You're staying, you're not leaving, right? And you're probably going to get scarred up a bit in the process. All right, so that's, and the Philistine said, "I defy the ranks of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together." And when Saul and all Israel heard this, these words of the Philistine, they said, "Let's go for it." Now remember, this is the big, tall, good-looking guy, right? Think about this for a minute. They picked him to fight the battles for them. He had had a couple victories, but the Lord is now departed. It's Ichabod. The glory has departed. And when the glory departs, fear is going to set in, right? It's going to set in. And so you've got all these military guys, and it's just one guy. I mean, don't you make the calculation in your head? Okay, he's big, but there's like 1,000 of us. Let's just go get him. Start chopping at his toes and keep chopping until you get up to his waist. Just keep chopping. Right? Isn't that the way you do that? No one thought that. They're like, nah, we're good. We're good. No one wants any part of this. No one wants any part of this. They were dismayed and greatly afraid. So now you have this scene, and remember, it's narrative, and so now the scene switches, and think of this as a camera angle, right? It's like watching a movie. You see this, and now the camera switches to David. You got Saul, afraid, the big guy, shouting stuff at Saul. Saul's a king. And this warrior, an average warrior, is telling a king this. Think about that, right? So now we switch to David. Now David, and kind of gets reduced, was the son of an Ephrathite of Bethlehem in Judah named Jesse, who had 8 sons. And in the days of Saul, the man was already old and advanced in years. The 3 oldest sons of Jesse had followed Saul to the battle. And that was standard. You know, when the call came, it was conscription. Everybody fights. Everybody's in. This is not a volunteer army. Right? Everybody's in, who's of age. And the names of the 3 sons who went to the battle were Eliab, the firstborn, next to him Abinadab, and the third Shammah. So we remember these guys, and remember what the scene was, right? Samuel comes and said, the Lord has anointed Jesse, one of your sons. And Jesse says, well, let me get my boys. We'll see which one it is. And he puts Eliab before him, and no, it's not it. And all 7 boys come, and Samuel rejects every one of them as king. Now that still stings. We talked about that. And they said, you got to have another son, right? And Jesse's like, yeah, but come on. You know, he's a shepherd. He's down in the field. You need to go get him. And so Eliab and Abinadab and Shammah, remember this, of course. David was the youngest, verse 14. The 3 eldest followed Saul to the battle. But David went back and forth from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. So what would happen in these battles, remember, this is not modern warfare. There are no joysticks, some guy sitting in Colorado dropping drone bombs on somebody in the Middle East. This is close up and personal. And so family members, in this case the youngest boy, was given the thing of making sure that he would take food and things like that to his brothers who were fighting, and supplies. This was the supply chain with the other families. So there was no supply sergeant. You fed your family, and someone else would feed their family while they're at the fight. And so he went back and forth to do that. For 40 days, the Philistine came forward and took his stand morning and evening. And where have you heard that before? Why is 40 important? Have you thought about that? Now, if you read your Bible a lot, you'll notice that the 40 appears about 126 times in the Bible. And it always refers to a time of temptation and testing. 100% of the time. So Israel was in the desert how long? 40 years. Prior to Moses taking them into the desert, how long was Moses in the desert? 40 years, yeah. When Moses takes them into Sinai, and he has to go on top of Sinai and hear from the Lord, how many days is he up there? 40. When God sends Jonah to Nineveh, and he goes, I'm not preaching to those pagans, and they're not circumcised, they're jerks, they're Gentiles. The Lord said, you're going. Sent him over there. How long was he there? 40 days. 40 days. By the way, how long was Jesus being tempted by Satan? 40 days. Getting it? All right. So all of this stuff is leading you up. When you read this, you're saying to yourself, all right, this guy is tempting and testing God's people. 40 days. So that would be the symbol, right? It's just as strong a symbol. Now, the only one Bible symbol everybody knows is 666. Problem is, the way they know it is misinterpreted, but at least they know the number, right? So, but 40 is a big number. Everybody knew what it was. All right. And Jesse said to David his son, take for your brothers an ephah of parched grain and these 10 loaves, and carry them quickly to the camp to your brothers. And take these 10 cheeses to the commander of their 1,000, and see if your brothers are well, and bring some token from them. Let them send something back that I'll know they're alive. There's no newspaper to hold up in front, So Now Saul and they and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah fighting with the Philistines. And David rose early in the morning and left the sheep with a keeper and took the provisions and went, as Jesse had commanded him. And he came to the encampment as the host was going out to the battle line, shouting the war cry. And Israel and the Philistines drew up for battle, army against army. And David left the things in charge of the keeper of the baggage and ran to the ranks and went and greeted his brothers. And as he talked with them, behold, the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, came up out of the ranks of the Philistines and spoke the same words as before. And now David heard him. All right? So you see the contrast that's being made. He comes and challenges Israel, and Saul hears him, and what does Saul do? Shrinks, runs, he's full of fear. Now David, the shepherd, comes running, and what does he do? He feeds his family. He feeds the commanders. He brings food. He takes care of people. And he comes running, and now Goliath speaks the same words to David. I wonder how David will respond. Will it look like Saul? No. All the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him and were much afraid. So, they got all cocky. We're going, right? You got to get this picture. I mean, it's a little sad. But, they get the chutzpah up, and they get all lined for battle, and they get upset, and they stand up, and then Goliath comes out, and it's like, oh, never mind. We're out of here. We're not doing it. So, I mean, they just didn't want any part of him. So they fled from him and were much afraid. And the men of Israel said, have you seen this man who has come up? Surely he has come up to defy Israel. And the king will enrich the man who kills him with great riches and will give him his daughter. And by the way, David's going to get Michal, Saul's daughter, and it's going to be not a great deal. We probably won't look at that story, but I should just tell you ahead of time, she's not a great bargain. She's not great. And make his father's house free in Israel. What does that mean, to make his father's house free in Israel?
No taxes.
No taxes. That's exactly right. Same thing it means right now. Right? You're not going to pay any taxes. You're going to get the king's daughter. You're going to marry into the king's family. You're going to be somebody in Israel. And David said to the men who stood by him, what shall be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? See what the issue is? The reproach of Israel. David knows what the problem is here. The problem is he's defying Israel's God. He knows this. And for who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? That's not Saul's reaction, is it? No. And the people answered him in the same way. So shall it be done to the man who kills him. So they repeat. This is the stuff you're going to get. And now you think, okay, well, he's sort of interested because he's asking. And you think, boy, I bet he's going to get a lot of support. He's going to fight for the Lord, and probably his family and friends are really behind him. And, this is going to be great. And now Eliab, his eldest brother, heard when he spoke to the men, and Eliab's anger was kindled against David. And he said, why have you come down? And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? You see what a slam that is? Yeah. What do you think you are doing here? What are you doing here? Eliab is not impressed. Eliab is angry. I know you, and look what Eliab accuses him of. Eliab becomes a mini Freud. Everybody does this, right? You start presuming on people's motives. I know your presumption and the evil of your heart, for you have come down to see the battle. You just come down here for a good time. You want to see people die, And David said, what have I done now? Was it not but a word? I mean, this is so Jewish, by the way. What? Well, what did I do? I speak a word, and this is what it's so typical. Was it not but a word? And I love this line. And he turned away from him toward another. Now, that should be your response to it. He comes down and he's concerned, and you're going to see about the glory and the honor of God. and his own family is not going to help him, does he sit there and say, okay, never mind, it's family. Family is so important. It's really important. He turns away from him to another. Do you remember Jesus when he's in the house and he's healing, and they come to get him in the Gospel of Mark because he's crazy. And they say, Jesus is crazy. And they come in and they report to Jesus, and they say, Jesus, your family's outside, your brothers and your mother and everybody. And what's Jesus say? Oh, you're right, it's my family. I really need to, abandon the work of the Lord to do that. And he goes, who is my family? These people are my family. The people of God are my family. The church of God is my family. And that's exactly what happens here. I'm sorry. You understand what Jesus means now when he says, when I've come to divide, I have come to set mother against father, son. Some of you will have to make difficult decisions. You will either serve God or you won't. And sometimes they're family decisions. And this is exactly, he turned from him to another and spoke in the same way, and the people answered him again as before. So and when the words that David spoke were heard, they repeated them before Saul, and Saul sent for him. And David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail because of him, because of this guy. Your servant will go and fight this Philistine. I'll do it. No problem. I'm going to go fight the Philistine. And Saul said to David, you are not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are but a youth, and he has been a man of war from his youth. But David said to Saul, your servant used to keep sheep for his father, and when there came a lion or a bear and took a lamb from the flock, I went after him and struck him and delivered it out of his mouth. And if he rose against me, I caught him by his beard and struck him and killed him. Your servant has struck down both lions and bears, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be like one of them, for he has defied the armies of the living God. And David said, the Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said to David, go, and the Lord be with you. Now that's a very different response, isn't it? It is what Saul should have said. It is what all the Israelite armies should have said. But what is the issue at stake? You say, what is the problem?
Your battery, other side, on the floor.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that only cost about $1,000, so that's no problem. Thank you. All this is being recorded. All right. Thank you. No, that's a good call. All right, what was the issue? The issue is this. Israel believes that Goliath is stronger than God. The issue is belief. That's the whole point of the story, belief. So the question for you is, what do you believe is stronger than God? And the way that you know whatever it is that you believe is stronger than God is based on your fear. Remember what the New Testament says, right? Fear is not of God. Perfect love casts out fear. What did Paul say to Timothy? I've not given you a spirit of timidity. Right? What does that long list at the end of Revelation, all this nasty stuff, people that you think probably should go to hell by the list, and right in the middle of that list is the word cowards. See what the issue is? The real issue of our lives is, who do you really trust? And sort of the trigger mechanism is, what makes you fearful? Fear is a litmus test. And so when you feel your heart becoming full of fear and panic, you don't need medication. You need to believe God. It's an expression of unbelief. And somewhere in your heart you're saying, I don't believe that God is bigger than this situation. He probably can't do this one. And he's done so much for so many other people. It's not that you don't believe that. It's that you don't believe it for you in that moment. And so you become full of fear. This is why Jesus said, be anxious for nothing, right? The reason that we can be anxious for nothing is because we actually believe God more than we believe our problems. And the whole Israelite army, supposedly the people of God, the greatest warriors of Israel, Saul, the biggest man in town, right? Big bad Leroy Brown, right? Does not believe God enough to go against this giant. But David, a little shepherd, dressed as a shepherd, comes running into camp and said, I'll take this guy out because the Lord will not be defied, his glory will not be dishonored. And so David comes in, so verse 38, so then Saul says, okay, let me help you in the only way I know how to help you. Because what is happening here? It's a completely new perspective, right? Saul sees Goliath, and David sees Goliath. But they do not see the same thing. They don't see the same thing. And honestly, that's a massive spiritual lesson. I'm struggling to come up with an illustration, but maybe this will work. If it doesn't, I don't know. We'll try another one. But have you ever had a friend who is just deep in a panic and something bad is happening, right? And you look at the situation, and granted it's okay, but in your heart you're like, what's the big deal? It's nothing, right? It's like, why are they getting all worked up about this? It's because you have a perspective that knows that that situation is really not nearly as dire, as tragic as they think it's going to be. It's not going to be that tragic because they just have a different view. And because of maybe your history or because of your experience or something, you know that it's not going to be nearly that bad. And so they are literally, breaking down. And you're like, no, it's going to be fine, don't worry about it. And you feel nothing. That's the difference between belief and unbelief, right there. And that separates the men from the boys. I'm sorry, is that a hand or a stretch?
That's a hand.
Okay, good. Yes, for the sake of the camera, what Paul is saying is said, COVID gave us a lot of opportunities. There were a lot of people that thought that COVID was bigger than God. And they kept their church closed. And we opened our church and people come in and say, you guys aren't even wearing masks? No, not really, no. No, we're fine. We're good to go. It's not just the Goliaths. It comes down to individual little life decisions. How are you going to see the problem? And there was a big reward offered for this, and no one's lining up for the reward, and sure enough, David takes it on. Now, Saul's going to help David, and again, the only way he knows how to help him. Verse 38, then Saul clothed David with his armor. He put a helmet of bronze on his head and clothed him with a coat of mail, and David strapped his sword over his armor. He's trying, all right, the king's going to dress him, all right, here we go. And remember, he's been playing for him and stuff. Saul might not even know exactly who it is. It's not clear from the prior passage that Saul knows who this kid they bring in to play for him is, in the presence of the king, but he might. And he tried in vain to go, for he had not tested them. Then David said to Saul, I cannot go with these, for I have not tested them. So David put them off, and then he took his staff in his hand. What's a staff for? It's for a shepherd. He took a staff in his hand and chose 5 smooth stones from the brook and put them in the shepherd's pouch. And his sling was in his hand, and he approached the Philistine. Who's approaching the enemy of God? The shepherd of the sheep. See why Jesus is the son of David? The great shepherd of the sheep fights the battles. You don't need all the armor of the world. You don't need all of what the world believes is going to give you strength and courage and fortitude and all these things. For when you are weak, he is strong. Right? And isn't that exactly what we've been studying Sunday nights in 1 Corinthians? The foolish things of the world confound the wise. And here comes this little shepherd, and you're going to see this great, mighty warrior. Do you think he ever lost a fight? No. He's definitely undefeated. Right? He is definitely undefeated. And this kid is going to come up, the youngest boy of Jesse, and he's going to come dressed like a shepherd, not ready for battle at all. And so the Philistine moved forward and came near to David with his shield bearer in front of him, just in case. Kid probably knows jujitsu. So. And when the Philistine looked and saw David, he disdained him, for he was a youth and ruddy and handsome in appearance. He just had no respect for this at all. You have no respect. This is like, the next door neighbor's kid that you don't like that much anyway, because he's like Dennis the Menace, right? And you go out and you're mowing your lawn or something, the kid runs up to you with one of his toy guns, like bang, bang, you're dead. It's that level of disregard. Get away from me. He's like, there's no threat here. If I never see you, it's not going to be a problem. Just get away from me. But David, and the Philistine said to David, am I a dog that you come to me with sticks? He's got a staff in his hand, right? What do this is just not respectful to me, a great warrior. Why don't you bring someone a little better than this? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said to David, come to me, and I will give you your flesh to the birds of the air and to the beasts of the field. And then David said something to the Philistine. Now David's going to talk. Hear how different David, who is full of the Spirit of the Lord, speaks. He doesn't speak like Saul, who is not full of the Spirit of the Lord. Listen to how a man fully indwelt by God speaks. You come to me with a sword and with a spear and with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts. Boom. Boom. You come to me with all your cancer and sickness, I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts. You come to me with your financial difficulties, I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts. You come to me with all your relational crap, I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts. And if you don't come in the name of the Lord of hosts, you ain't coming with much. Honestly, you're not coming with much. But I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. That's the issue. And this day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. And I will give the dead bodies of the host of the Philistines this day to the birds of the air, to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel, and that all this assembly may know that the Lord saves not with sword and spear. This is not how it occurs. For the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hand. Do you see the difference in the belief system? Do you see the difference in the perspective? And at the same time, he is claiming the glory of God as the one who gives him strength. I should remind you that he is not a pacifist. He's going to kill him. And he's going to cut his head off. Christianity is not pacifism. But when we have to fight, we fight in the name of the Lord. And the trick is knowing the difference, right? The trick is knowing the difference. But David is not a pacifist. This is not a fairy tale. He's going to kill this guy, and he's going to cut his head off, and he's going to parade the head around. David's a tough guy. He kills bears. He kills lions. You want to get in a wrestling match with this kid? I mean, really? And he's going to be seriously underestimated. So, verse 48, when the Philistine arose and came and drew near to meet David, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet the Philistine. And David put his hand in his bag and took out a stone and slung it and struck the Philistine on his forehead. And the stone sank into his forehead and he fell on his face to the ground. One shot, boom, you're done. By the way, you know, I hope this is not too politically incorrect for you. And if you're watching by way of YouTube, we don't really care. But do you know how you kill an elephant? You know, it's not a heart shot like a deer. There's one spot right here in their forehead that's soft, and there's no bone. And that's where you put the bullet. If you put it somewhere else, run. Run. All right. So David knows he's a great shot. He's probably made this shot 100 times with wild animals. We think of a sling as one of these little things, but you know it's not like that at all. It's a real weapon. If you know how to use it, it's longer, you know, and the momentum and the torque is unbelievable on these things. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and with a stone, and struck the Philistine and killed him. Now remember, he had a bronze helmet on, right?
Yeah.
So he had to hit him dead on. This had to be a perfect shot. I mean, if that stone had bounced off that bronze helmet, there might not have been a lot of time for another one, right? So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone and struck the Philistine and killed him. And I love this line. There was no sword in the hand of David. None. And isn't that what everybody thinks you need? David didn't even have one. No sword. He's got nothing. So then David ran and stood over the Philistine and took his sword and drew it out of its sheath and killed him and cut off his head with it. And when the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they fled. Yeah, probably a good idea. And the men of Israel and Judah rose with a shout. Now they're happy, right? Yeah, okay, yeah, oh yeah, we're going to worship now. Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh, a bunch of fair weather Christians. It's unbelievable, you know? One guy kills them and they, okay, yes, we love Jesus. I'll sing a praise song. And they shouted, and they pursued the Philistines as far as Gath and the gates of Ekron, so that the wounded Philistines fell on the way from Sherarim as far as Gath and Ekron. And the people of Israel came back from chasing the Philistines, and they plundered their camp. And David took the head of the Philistine and brought it to Jerusalem, but he put his armor in his tent. He kept the armor. And you're going to see that sword show up again later in the story. Now, think about this. They hadn't conquered Jerusalem yet. Who was there? The Jebusites, remember? David is the one that builds the temple in Jerusalem. Why do you think he takes that head to the Jebusites? It's a warning shot. Joshua has been told to take over the promised land. And that was one of the towns not yet taken over. And in the providence of God, and as a prophecy, David, full of the Holy Spirit, runs and takes the evil head and said, you're next. And we're going to build the temple of the Lord right here. And that's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened. So that you know, you got to read a little further into the story. But, you know, keep all these little cues. There are no accidental little pieces of information. As soon as Saul saw David go out against the Philistine, he said to Abner, the commander of the army, Abner, whose son is this guy? Because he wants to know the father. Remember, he didn't personally recruit David, right? It was somebody saying, you know, I know a guy. So Saul doesn't know that. I mean, remember, Saul didn't know Samuel. You think he's going to know David's father? I mean, Saul is clueless. Saul is so full of himself, he has no idea what's going on around him. And he's half crazy anyway, as we've already learned, right? David has to play the harp for him to calm him down. And all of a sudden, Saul's like, who's this guy's family? Where did he come from? And he said to Abner, the commander of the army, Abner, whose son is this youth? And Abner said, as your soul lives, O king, I do not know. And the king said, inquire whose son the boy is. And as soon as David returned from the striking down of the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul with the head of the Philistine in his hand. And Saul said to him, whose son are you, young man? And David said, I am the son of your servant, Jesse the Bethlehemite. Now that's a great little story, don't you think? That's a great little story. All right, so we'll have a few minutes to get a few lessons out of that. Yeah? All right. I love that story.
That's a good story.
It's a great story. So, I mean, just, so we know why it's in the Bible, right? It's not in the Bible so, that strong guy like David is going to fight for his own honor. It's not in the Bible so that you can say, I dare to be a David. It's in the Bible to show you what an insignificant, unreputable nobody who discounts the regular way of doing things, but stands in the presence of the Lord and will do whatever the Lord tells him, no matter what's in front of him, what the Lord will do through someone like that. And that person will slay evil. And that person, of course, was Jesus Christ, ultimately. Right? That's why that story's in the Bible. Same reason Daniel's in the Bible. It's not dare to be a Daniel. It's make sure you're filled with the Spirit, just like Daniel. Right? All right, so let's get a few lessons. First of all, David, as we saw, brought a whole new world to view here. Because what you're seeing is two different worldviews in collision. It's the worldview view of the Spirit versus the worldview without the Spirit, right? That's what it amounts to. And that's the way that you get to live your life. You will either live your life completely with a worldview that the Spirit of the living God is alive and and the same Spirit that raised Christ from the dead lives in you, or he doesn't. It's binary. It's a complete antithesis. There's no common ground to that. You're either for me or you're against me. And if that's true, two things. There's no need to fear. And again, remember, fear is sort of the litmus test. But not only is there no need to fear, there's no right to flee. An awful lot of what we congratulate ourselves for in our spiritual life is really escapism. I'm just being smart. And so we don't want to confront anything. We don't want to confront evil. You'll let evil speak all over your worship service on a Sunday morning and not do anything about it. I mean, you can't do it. You can't do it. You can't sanction it. You can't stand for it. You don't have a right to flee. You have to go into battle. But you don't go into battle alone. You go into battle with the armor of the Lord, right? And we don't have to fear any of that. So this is like the big difference between these two things. But what did David have to do, if you think about this for a minute now, and it's probably a couple things you have to consider for yourselves. But David had to fight so he could get to fight. Right? He had to fight so he could get to fight. So he said, well, I'm just going to sally forth, and I'll just be able to go right at it. And there's probably two or three things that you have to understand that you're probably going to face before you'll even get into battle. First of all, you're going to face leadership doubt. I don't know, you probably can't do that. And if you do, I'll give you, maybe you take some armor and you'll get it done. Saul's leader in Israel, but he didn't have the Spirit of the Lord, and all of a sudden it's going to be doubt. And some of you might face that. I hope it's not here, though. I mean, I'd hate to think that we would do that. But the Lord tells you to do something, and you'll say, I'm going to talk to someone about that, and they throw cold water all over it. I don't know if you want to do that. It's probably a bad idea. And that was Saul. I don't know. He doubted him. He was cynical. I don't know. Well, maybe you can put on the armor. You can do something like that. And then you'll also have family criticism. You know, and I say family, but that's family, friends, inner circle, everybody you know, that kind of thing. You have to understand, you know, if you stand up for the Lord, you know, not everybody's going to, you know, think you're a whiz-bang for doing it. You know, and it sounds awful, but, you know, when we get to 1 Corinthians 7 on Sunday night, what does Paul advise the believing spouse if the unbelieving spouse gives him a hard time and leaves? Do you know what the advice is? Send him give him a Hallmark card and beg him. He says, no, let him go. Let him go. I was like, really? Yeah. That's you, let him go. And honestly, sometimes, you know, you're not good, you know, you're going to have to, you know, sort of make that choice. And then, who's the church? Israel. That was a pretty aggressive bunch out there, weren't they? They were, you know, they were full of lethargy. They were, you know, they didn't know, I don't know, I'm not going to do it. You know, Saul offers them everything. You know, a tax-free life. You get to be the son-in-law of the king. You get, you know, and he didn't consult with his daughter, by the way, different day and age. You know, if he says to the daughter, you know, that's your guy, that's her guy. And there are no takers, zero, no takers. And that can be the church. You know, you can be sitting in a church and saying to yourself, let's go fight this battle. And you look around and everybody's like looking at their hymnal and they're all looking spiritual. You know, they don't really want to fight. They don't want to get into the battle. They don't want to do it. They don't want to do it. So that's the same thing that David faced. Now, I have kind of a one-word question for this. What qualified David for the battle? What qualification did he have? He believed God more than he believed Goliath. He believed God more than he believed Saul. He believed God more than he believed his brothers. He believed God more than he believed the people of Israel. He believed God more than everybody else. He had faith. That's what qualifies you for the battle too. It's also what disqualifies you. Unbelief. You're not going to win anything. It's never going to happen. It's just never going to happen. All right, so now we'll wrap up with 3 things that motivated David, because we have to watch what our motives are. Let's say, you know, we fought the fight to get into the fight, right? And we're really expressing belief, all right? But what's our heart motive to get here? What motivated David's heart? So we got 3 motivations for David, all right? 3 motivations for David. All right. First of all, and all these are going to start with one word, right? Zealous. What are you zealous for? What do you really want? What are you really after? What's he zealous for? First of all, he is zealous for God's honor. He is not going to allow Goliath, some Philistine, to disrespect God. He's horrified by it. He is horrified that someone would dishonor the Lord of glory. And I hate to drive this point home, but the Church of Jesus Christ today is not horrified. Not horrified at all. Well, that's just the way it is. No, I mean, every place you look around, the name of the Lord is dishonored, and his glory is dishonored. We're not horrified. Which is why we don't fight. We're not motivated to fight, because we're not, it's like, okay, say anything about my God you want to say. Do anything you want. And David steps into the battle because he is zealous for the honor of the Lord. He is outraged at the pagan. Are you outraged at pagans? No, that's not loving. Was David loving to Goliath? That's the wrong definition of love, kids. I'm sorry. That's always what people say. Well, Christians, you're supposed to be loving. First of all, that's the wrong definition. If you're not horrified by sin, if you're not horrified by that which dishonors God, if you have to hate what God hates. And you have to hate it enough to kill it. It's like, you can't talk like that. I'm sorry. The Bible talks like that. You got to step up. if you're just neutral about things that dishonor the Lord, that's not deep spirituality. That's not increased level of love. That's just disinterest. It's just unbelief. You just don't care. So he is zealous for the honor of God, but he's zealous for something else too. He is zealous to protect God's people. He is zealous to protect God's people. And we have to be zealous to protect God's people. You can't let. Someone told me this story. I'm afraid because we're on tape to even repeat it, because I didn't independently verify it. But after our little scene on Sunday morning, another person told me that they had seen where a woman had gone into a Catholic church with her shirt off, and then had taken, and I'm sure this was fake, but had gone up to the Mary and performed a fake abortion with blood in a church. Now, don't call yourself a Christian if you sit there and say, well, that's just, pick her up by her hair and throw her out. You can't let that into the worship of God. You can't let evil come into your church services and start spouting off. Pick it up by its hair and throw it out the window. Cut its head off and parade it around Jerusalem. I'm sorry. I know that, in this day and age, we've all been taught to this. No. Bless your heart, sweetie. We're not doing that. We're not doing it. So he's zealous to protect God's people. He's zealous for the honor of God. But he was also zealous to do something else too, and I love this. He was zealous to display God's deliverance and his grace. He was the only one of the bunch that knew that a gracious God would bring deliverance if David just trusted the Lord. He's the only one in the whole crowd that knew it. And he was zealous for everyone else to see that God is a God of grace who delivers his people. And he said, I'll step up and show everybody that that's true. And did you see the reaction? I gave it a little tongue-in-cheek sarcasm, of course, But when he did that, what did the rest of them do? It brought encouragement to them, right? Now they're running after him, they're hooting and hollering, and they're beating up the rest of the Philistines, and they're singing songs and psalms to the Lord as they do it, right? And sometimes you just need one guy in the church to step up for the honor of the Lord's name, to protect God's people, and to show everybody once again that God does deliver from evil. And that gets the rest of the church going, and that brings revival. And we have a name for that. That was called the Reformation. That was called Martin Luther. And that was called John Calvin. And those guys, they tried to kill him. They tried to kill him for this. This wasn't some little, cute little theological debate. And if it wasn't for those guys standing up, would still have, 13-year-old bishops and popes with concubines and umpteen children taking money so you could buy your relatives out of purgatory. Thanks be to God that one guy said, enough is enough, we're not doing this anymore. And that was Martin Luther. And that gave us the Reformation. So let's just read one passage in closing, because I want you to see how the Bible ends. People get worried because Jesus goes into the temple and cleans it out. Do you see how he's acting like David? He's going to he cleaned Goliath out of the temple. How nice was he to the Pharisee knuckleheads? You brood of vipers. You're of your father the devil. Well, that's not very loving, Jesus. Ew. But this is the real Jesus in chapter 19 of Revelation, and we'll close with this little paragraph. I want you to understand who Jesus really is. He is your warrior king. He fights and he kills evil on your behalf. Jesus is not a pacifist. He is not. Then I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse. The one sitting on it is called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he judges and makes war. Jesus makes war. He brings it to you, and he brings it to evil. His eyes are like a flame of fire, and on his head are many diadems as crowns, and he has a name written that no one knows but himself. He is clothed in a robe dipped in blood, and the name by which he is called is the Word of God. And the armies of heaven, arrayed in fine linen, white and pure, were following him on white horses. And from his mouth comes a sharp sword with which to strike down the nations. He didn't send him a Hallmark card. He's not going to. He strikes down the nations, and he will rule them with a rod of iron. And he will tread the winepress of the fury of the wrath of God Almighty. And on his robe and on his thigh he has a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. That's Jesus. And if you try to worship anything less than that, you're worshiping an anemic, wrong Jesus. It's not the Jesus of the Bible. This is the Jesus of the Bible. And this is the one who comes and sets up the new heavens and the new earth. Your warrior king is coming on a white horse. And trust me, he's not a pacifist. And you need that, because you need someone to fight your Goliaths in your battle and the evil that was killing you. Thanks be to God, we have a warrior king in Jesus Christ, our Savior and our Lord. Let's pray together.